Welcome back. Great you're still here. We've got some exciting stuff in this part of the tutorial. We're now finally going to build the stuff that is actually getting shown inside of the chart. Before, we created an endpoint that shows all the symbols from the database. The second endpoint has shown all the years that are in the database. And now we're going to build the endpoint that is going to show the data that is inside of the database. There's really no easy way to approach this instead of just showing you the data structure that we need, and then we're going to model the JSON according to the data structure that we need. Okay, so going into the documentation from Chart.js, and then looking at the get started sample and getting started, we see how it works. The idea is that all this parameter right here, this is being supplied by XData. So instead of having to define all the information in our web application client side, our XData server is going to deliver that data to us. And if we look at this is the chart that gets drawn. And what happens is that you have a JSON object which tells basically which type of chart is supposed to be drawn. So here it's a bar chart. However, that could very well also be a line chart. And then we have another object called data that contains labels and the different data sets. For example, label, number of votes right here for red, blue, yellow, green, purple, orange. And then we have another array with the actual data inside of the data sets that has the actual number. And that's exactly what we're going to create from our database. So in this video, you're not only going to learn how to transfer data according to a specific data type. No, in this example, we're actually going to create a very flexible dynamic JSON. And instead of using the XData capability to generate JSON based on a data type that we define, no, in this case, we're directly going to return data using the TJSON object that is part of Delphi. The only change that we're going to make is that we're not going to create labels and a data. Instead, we're going to use a tuple or tuple, whichever pronunciation you prefer. And what we do is that we have in there, in data, it could also be an object. Instead of just being a number, you can also give an object with X and Y, and then you don't need to specify the labels. This is something that you can find out going through the documentation and looking at all the different charts. For example, the chart type that we're going to build is a line chart. And the line chart here has the type line. And this page is actually where I got the idea to do this, because you see that they assign this to a variable. And then I was thinking, why don't you assign this variable from a server response from your web service? And that's how this idea grew and grew and grew, where I just thought, well, if we can do it for the configuration, why not just do it for the data as well? This is how I came to this idea that I'm presenting to you today. So that's how we get there. You see that even though the type is completely different, it is a line chart, the overall structure of the document is the same. It's again labels and data. And that's what we're building, a line chart, and we're going to add a couple of properties here to customize it. I'll lead you through that step by step. However, we're pretty much going to stay with the standard default behavior of Chart.js. With regards to the data, you find that in the general data structures. And then this is the primitive here where you have a number, but here this is the solution that we're going to use. So instead of having the labels and the data, we're just going to have the data with X and Y. X in our case is going to be, as shown here, a date, and Y is going to be the end of day value for the stock. What we're not going to do, we're not going to format the axes that they are going to have date time values. We're not going to look into zooming or panning or grouping. all these kind of features. Maybe I do that later if there's enough interest. So you have to basically comment here on this video that interests you, that you want more information how you can build this into the server. But otherwise, we're just going to keep this as an introduction. So going from there, what I always do is, first of all, define the service method that we need. And as we saw from the client, we need to specify the year, the stock symbol, and then we want a chart for that. So going into the stock service, the definition is as follows. First of all, I want to make it HTTP GET again, so we can test it easily, and then function. And I called it line chart, symbol, string, and after the symbol, we need the year, right? Year, integer. And the return value, I hinted at that a little bit, is not a data type, it's a TJSON object. That means it's going to be flexible. We create the JSON object ourselves. As a side note, this is very helpful. You can apply this TJSON object creation to any of your VCL applications. If you never have created a JSON document manually, this will help you quite a lot. And with that, we think we could be ready, right? However, if we look back or think back at the example, we could also define all years. And we had this special case that we say the year does not have to be specified. If we don't specify the year, it's basically going to be 0 as a default parameter. And that's great. That should work. However, this will only work for Delphi. XData is actually not going to be able to use it just like that. So you need to insert X for XData default, and then the default value is 0 for that particular parameter. That will work fine for XData. And then it is valid to just call line chart with a symbol without a year if you don't want to. We're always going to send symbol and year. Just if we want all years to be shown, we're just going to set year to 0, which equals or matches the default value. TJSON object is not known. That's rather expected because that is part of system JSON. It's part of Embarcadero Delphi. It is not part of XData. This is another great thing that TMS decided. They decided to use the standard JSON library from Delphi. Of course, it cost them a little bit of extra work because, as you might know, there are like 3 different JSON libraries inside of Delphi. There's one that is part of DataSnap, and then that REST server architecture. Then we have the system.json, and then there's also one embedded as part of FireDeck. So there's quite a lot of JSON in Delphi that you might not realize, but this is the one. If you open up the documentation and search for JSON, this is the recommended unit nowadays. So let me just separate these 2 different lines. And then here, we cannot forget, if we add it to the service, we also have to add it to the service implementation. And there, once again, we need to take out the default parameter marker. Just like we don't need the HTTP GET or the HTTP POST in the implementation, we also don't need any other custom attributes. And here, with regards to the JSON object, we add system.json to this users clause as well. So that's that. Control-Shift-C, implementation. We copy paste, controller, and then here, once again, line chart, symbol, year. And obviously this is red because we haven't defined it yet. We go to the service controller. Once again, we can copy paste the method fingerprint I wanted to say, so I should stay on that. So here, copy paste. The only thing I do different if it's classes in Delphi, I always add an A to the parameter. So I know that this is the Delphi world, and if I don't have an A in front of it, that's the service world where you don't want to give off a specific or a language specific name convention and just tell what the parameter is. So with that, I already have system.json included here, so I don't need to add it. And now we have to create this JSON object. And once again, the structure is going to be result is TJSON object.create. Then the try except block if we have any kind of exception result.free, and we re-raise that exception. And then in there, of course, we're going to need a query. The database manager, I think, yeah. Shared.getQuery. And then there we do a try finally, where we say tdatabase manager dot shared dot return release query. And where do we want to release it to? Release L query. Perfect. That's it. The query we want to use has to return the data, of course. And the data that we want to get is the end of day stock value of the stock that we select. So stock is a parameter, the symbol, and also for the year, but only the year if it is specified. So once again, we start by setting what we know. So at this point, we only know select date and close. Close is the value of the stock at closing from stocks where symbol equals symbol. This is the denotation for a parameter in FireDeck. And of course, everything else we don't know, because we don't know if we need to filter by year and what to order by. We don't know that yet. So what we can say in this case is if a year is bigger than the 0, then begin. And now we can go back to the other syntax that is available to us, SQL add, and we basically add the statement, the comparison, if we want to filter by year as well. And we can do that by simply adding the statement as this. We compare the year, which we get with this expression, if that matches the year that is passed in. But we only do that if the year is bigger than 1. So that extends the existing where clause right here, where symbol equals symbol, and if we have a year bigger than 0, and this expression equals year. So finally, we also want to add a sorting order, but we want to do that all the time. So we say lquery.sql.add. In this case, we say order by, and yet again another date expression, Julian day. It gives me the number of days that is basically can be compared to the Linux epoch date, Julian date, date, so the day of a date. So it will be an integer number, and that makes it easy to sort by it, because otherwise if you sort by the field date in SQLite, it is a string, right? So, and the string wouldn't get the search order that you might want. So with that, you get the search order by date. Perfect. And the next step is now that you have to set the parameters. So what we need to do in any case is we need to set the symbol. So we say lquery param by name symbol as string. And what is it? Well, it's our parameter up here, right? So we set it to a symbol. And then only if we have a year, so once again, we could say if a year bigger than 0, but there is an even better way to do it. You can say if assigned lquery.params find param. You can search for the parameter if it's inside of the statement. And if that does not equal nil, meaning it's assigned, then we know the parameter is there, and then you can set it lquery param by name year as integer in this case. And you might think it's an integer, but if we look here, this is a string. So this should also be a string. So we do string equals a year dot to string. And I just saved you 30 minutes of my time that I wasted because I had as integer here, and that doesn't work. Basically what happens is none of the tuples in the database will be selected, plain and simple. So this is a way, an approach, I should say, that works really well. And going from there, we can basically open the query. I'll query open. And again, we can check if there is no data inside of the query, we can throw an exception. In this case, this might actually happen. For example, if you specify the wrong symbol, or if you specify the wrong year, or you specify a year that is not available for the symbol. Imagine you have difference of years for the different symbols. So here, the error message should be no data found. Okay, 404. And finally, now we need to build the JSON response. And the response needs to look like a certain way. And what I always do is I copy from the documentation what I need. So in this case, I copied this. So I insert it as comment, like this. And then I know exactly what I need to create in the JSON. So we have to start with type is line, and then here, not the data labels. Instead, I want to do label. And then here, what I want to do is I create an object. X is, I don't know, 2020 02 20, for example, comma, Y, and then this. That's the kind of data structure that I want to create with regards to what the chart is going to look like. And of course, here, this option scales Y begin at 0. Make sure that the Y-axis begins at 0 and is not scaled according to the space that the chart has available. So that is just something we will add later on, because I really want you to understand the process that we're doing here. So in this case, we already have result initialized as a TJSON object. And what we need to do now is we need to add certain things to the JSON object. But first, I'm going to start with creating the values, these tuples here, X and Y, because that is something that we have in access inside of the database. So what I'll do is var L values is a TJSON array dot create. So I'm basically creating this tiny little corner here with saying TJSON away dot create. And then again, while not query EOF to begin, and then again, query dot next. And then I'm going to say var L value, the single value, is a TJSON object dot create. Again, that's this tiny little corner here. That means it's an object with properties. Then I can say L value, add pair, and that can have a name, so X, and a value. And that is L query field by name, in this case date, as string. And the same for the Y. Add pair Y, comma, and then L query field. And code completion, I don't know why it's in the way of everything here, so I'm gonna get rid of it. Field by name. The field is called close. And again, code completion is staying in the way. That's float. Okay, perfect. So with that, we have one value, and we can add these to the array. So we can say L values dot add. Yes, it's really that comfortable. TJSON arrays are dynamic, so you can add to them like a list. L values add L value. And with that, the L value is also tied to the array. So if we free the array, all the values will be freed as well. Memory management is also fine. Good. So at this point, we have created this. So basically, data is L values. So that is something we can add later on to the JSON object. And we're done with the database. That's the reason why I put that first. So now we can concentrate off creating this L data that I just mentioned. So what I do is I say var L data is a TJSON object. Then we have data sets, L data sets. So this, right, is TJSON array create. Even though we only have one, this is an array that has to be in there. TJSON array, and then L data set is the one data set, which is an object again. TJSON object dot create. Okay, and this data set then has here, this object has, in our case, a label, data, and a border width. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do L dataset dot add pair label. And what's the label going to be? The symbol, a symbol. And then L dataset add pair data. We did that already. I said so. So L values, that's the array with the data values. And then L dataset add pair. And then we're going to do border width. Remember that JSON is case sensitive, so you have to write it exactly like it is in the documentation. And then we do stuff. I'm looking at my other code here. We're not going to do that yet. We're going to fine tune that a little bit, the dataset settings. So now we can go to the datasets, and add the data set to the array. And then the L data, which is the outermost thing, add pair is going to be data sets, comma, L data sets. Perfect. So we now have created data sets, this part here. That's how far we are so far. Doesn't seem like much, but we've gotten a long deal done already. So now, let me see. The next step is that we need the result, basically the utmost that we created here, the TJSON object. We can put it all together. We can say result dot add pair, and then say type, because that's the first level. Type is line. That is fixed. Result add pair. Then we have data. Guess what the data is? L data. So at this point, we have created this. Now we could add the options, which we're going to leave out for now. So we're not going to do the options for now. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. And now we're done. That's the crazy thing. So now we have created the endpoint that we needed. Let's see if it compiles. Yes, perfect. It compiles. So let me just check if I called it in the implementation. Yes, I called it here. So with that, we can go to Swagger. We will need to start it, of course. Start. We can go to localhost Swagger UI. And there we have the line chart. We can try it out and see now we have for each parameter, we have an input field, but this is required. This one isn't. That's cool, isn't it? So what we can do, we do AAPL, and then let's do 2024 because it's the least amount of values. Execute. And there we go. This is the URL that we would be able to use. See that we have a query string, symbol equals AAPL, year is 2024. And our JSON response is type line, data, data sets, the array, label, data, X, Y. And that's all nicely generated as we need it. Perfect. And then here the border width 3. Cool. That really worked. So let us test it, like what happens if we enter something that we don't have. We get an exception, no data found, and the status code of the service is 404. Perfect, not found. So that works. Let's say AAPL, and we want a year, 2025. Should also not work, not found. Perfect. So with that, let's do 0. Execute. Takes a long time, but here it is. It starts in 2019, and we have our chart. Perfect. So at this point, we can use the test that we can build a web client to test if it really works like we want it to. Right now, we just have the JSON document, but of course, we need something better than just the JSON document. So at this point is where I start to either build my TMS web core application that has minimal design, that just calls the chart and all these things. In this case, I'm going to build the HTML design first, and then we're going to build the JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, and then I'm going to build the TMS web core application so you can see the advantages that you have using Delphi or Object Pascal code compared to JavaScript. So let's do that next.